Well,
Yep.
hello everyone. So today we've got Anthony Aron on my Walking the Talk podcast. So I'd just like to start by welcoming you, Anthony, and if you don't mind sharing a quick introduction on yourself.
Yeah. Hey, Claire. Thanks for having me on the show. So my name is Anthony. My background is in exercise and health science. I've been running my own coaching business for about 4 years. I'm now deciding to travel the world next year in order to learn different styles of training. So this includes like going to Japan to learn a martial art. Could be like um, India for yoga and Himalayas for breath work, South America for plant medicine. So the idea is pretty much to learn different styles of like ancient wisdom from the past, like Chinese traditional medicine, and combine that with like some sort of like modern science modalities of training. And I'm also going to be running my own podcast and also just to kind of share the wisdom that I learned along the way. So yeah, that's a bit about my background and what I'm doing now. Yeah.
Wow, wow. So just something I've noticed there. So you started off with the kind of health and sciences, right? And
Hmm.
the timelines seem to be going back, I've noticed, like, are they? Like going back to ancient kind of
Oh,
things.
yeah. Um, so funny. Well, I guess you couldn't really study the ancient stuff at university, like unless you did philosophy. And so, I was really into it. Like I'd say when I was a lot younger, when I was about, well, even in my like early teens, like 13, 14, I was quite into studying like Egyptian myth and Greek myth. And so a lot of these like storytelling sort of stuff that we were talking about earlier.
Hmm.
And then I think like it wasn't a wrong decision that I made, but like growing up, I was quite good at sports, and so that's where I got my social affirmation from. Even though like, and I kind of kept that like little nerdy part of myself that liked stories and stuff like on the side. Like, I actually had asthma and I actually had asthma and glasses, but I would deny that I had asthma, and it eventually went away. And I still don't use glasses, and I think my eyesight's better. So I don't know if it's just like complete denial and it just fixed itself up, but um. So yeah, there was a part of me that was, I guess, like a little afraid to admit what I actually liked and what I actually liked to study and spend my time with. Um, so then I ended up after I finished school, I went to, I had the choice to do psychology, philosophy, or sports science, and simply because like I was kind of afraid of what people would think if I went one direction, I followed the sports science because I knew that it wouldn't change what people thought I would do, and I thought it makes sense. I'd be quite good at that. And then actually, what I found when I was doing the degree was I didn't really study much. I was always the guinea pig. So like everyone's like, okay, well, someone has to jump on this bike and get tested, and everyone has to take his blood and then measure the lactic acid. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. Anything to not do the work. So that was kind of like that
Like,
was uni for me. Yeah, and I just like I did okay, but like I think I wasn't very I was passionate about it. I wouldn't say it was my love, like how I am with storytelling and narrative. I'd say that was more my calling. But I found so when I was studying sports science, I was also studying like writing and philosophy and Carl Jung's work on the side
hmm.
naturally. So you could tell me, hey, go study this, and I'll go study something else. Like, um, but I realized that the two are very similar. So then I started to like put together how the body works in terms of like the physiology and how storytelling works and how those things actually kind of align together. And then also being a health coach, I started realizing like even health coaching and how I would coach my clients is very similar to how I would then write a story or write a character for a story. And then I started to actually treat myself like that and be like, okay, well, if I was a character in a narrative in a story, then what kind of characteristics do I want? What kind of life do I want? What kind of and then then you become the author of the story, and that changes who you think you are in the framework. And so very quickly you start to become the main character and the author at the same time.
Wow. That's actually interesting. I've never actually thought about the link between storytelling and like I suppose the physical body and that and like health and stuff like that, even though I
Oh,
both are very important.
yeah, well, like the best example I have, like the one that really clicked when I was like the first, I think it was the very first thought I had when I realized it's the same thing,
Yeah.
was when I realized that um if you take on little stresses, like if you were a psychologist and you had a client with with a phobia, you have to slowly incrementally increase the stress, not too much where they get too afraid, not too little where there's no stress stimulus to then cause change to happen. And so new neurons are built, and that the belief and the strength in your mindset develops, like resilience. But if I want to do the same thing with the body, I literally have to tear the muscle. I need to expose it to a little bit of stress, not too much where the muscle tears and I can't repair it, not too little where there's no stimulus to then grow the muscle. So growth occurs where there's stress, just the right amount of stress.
Wow.
And so I was like, oh, well, that makes perfect sense. And so you can kind of use the same laws in physiology and science for the way that you treat your spirituality too. And so I think that's what like the combination of the body and mind would be, is working out how these two things correlate, and you sticking to like these laws and things that you find.
That's amazing. I've never thought about it in that way before. That's
Oh, you have to. Well, you probably didn't do sports science, did you?
no.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah. It's just. I think it's just because I was studying two things at the same time, because I wasn't really passionate about one, passionate about another. But I had to bring in. I think that's also a key as well. Like, people ask like, how do you create meaning in life, or how do you find something like that? It's like, well, if you can find how whatever your passion is, and see how that relates to the thing you're doing, then it's like, for example, you could be like, well, I'm not driven by this job, but it's like, okay, like, well, what does this job enable you to do that you love? And so, but I love surfing, like, and I love riding, I love traveling, but this job enables that. I was like, great, well, you don't have to love the job, you just have to love the things that it helps you do. And so that can be a way of like alchemizing and changing the way that you view your job if you want to stay, or it's like, actually I don't love this at all, and you want to leave. And so it's more about like, how do you find the love in something?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, like, because I know like timing in life is very important. Sometimes there is a time where you might need to step away from something. Sometimes it's like you need to go through, and you need to, face up to what it is you can learn from the experience, and grow from it,
Yeah.
and it takes it can take a lot of self-reflection, really, can't it, to kind of sit with what it is, I suppose you can get from an experience, be it in work, or be it in your personal life, or where you want to go in your direction,
Mm.
and actually
Yeah.
that's where I find like stories can come in such a powerful way, like who do I want to be in this part of my life, like what would the hero version of me need to do?
Yeah, I think that's like the most exciting question ever. Like that to me is like, wow, like I get so much energy when I get asked that question, or even just ask myself that question. So it's like, well, I can just start the day, but if I just start the day like that, I'm like instantly like, all right, what do I want to do? How can I be that person? How can I become that hero? How can, what am I trying to strive for here? And then just having that goal, that vision in mind, that sets up your neurology, sets up to sorry so relate this back to the body, right? If I have a vision, like so in my mindset, if I create a character, which is, this is now talking, it's kind of spiritual, it's the thoughts. So if I create a character, an idea, that becomes a place to go, or a place to be, like a certain direction, like. And what happens to the body is the body then sets up its neurology to tell you whether or not you're on the right path to that thing. So you release like cortisol and stress hormones if anything stops you from becoming that person, and you release like endorphins and serotonin, to like, which is positive emotion that tells you you are closer to becoming that person. So it's like, once you actually set like a vision for who you want to become, the whole body starts to align to that, and it tells you when you're closer to that, or not close to that as well.
Yeah.
So I like to think of like traffic, like when you're in traffic, you have like a destination to go to, like someone's house, and then like you're so stressed, and anyone that stops you in the way, if they're slowing down and cut you off, you get really shitty. But if you had no destination in mind, like you just can't calm the entire
Yeah.
time. It's kind of like that. It's kind of how I see it. I'm like, I'm freaking stressed out trying to get this person. Then you have to remind yourself, it's not about getting somewhere, it's about the journey. It's about embracing the fact that you're just going there, right? And being in flow with it all.
Yeah. And accepting on, obstacles that come
Yeah.
in your way.
Yeah, it's gonna happen. You just have to get better at handling those obstacles. But yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah, definitely where resilience, I suppose, can come in, and patience and
Mm.
all these wonderful things. So with stories, is story something that you've always been passionate about? Like
Yeah.
like
Yeah, I'd say so. Like, I don't know where that really came from. Like, I did have a really big experience when I was 22 years old. That was a psychedelic experience, and that really shaped a lot of things. However, it wasn't the origination of story. It kind of like amplified the way that I viewed the world. So, and I think the way a lot of us view the world, I don't think it's just myself. But no, I used to do things for the story. I used to have like a little tagline slogan that I would tell my friends and my sister. I was like, "Oh, just do it for the story." And I reckon I was like 12, walking around like I would just do things for the story. And literally, that was it. I was like, I realized like I think like if I just did something exciting, got a story out of it, and then came back home, or came to my friends, like it make you more popular because you had something to say, something to do, something exciting, something different. And I think like I got really addicted to that. Like I got really addicted to just like saying yes to things, just for the sake of it, and then having some really cool experience and then taking it back. And I think I've been still doing that. Like I'm still like, yep, sure, I'll go overseas and do this crazy ass thing. I think because it makes for a better story.
yeah.
And ultimately, like I think that's all for me, I'm like that's really all I have. Like if I sit down with someone and we have a conversation, like this is pretty much what we do all the time. It's like, well, like I have to share a story. Like, I'm on a podcast right now. I need to talk about something. Like, and then it became like this a very strong value of mine was to then have stories to tell, and hopefully some of them are meaningful, some of them are funny, some of this. And I think and also through story you experienced a full range of emotions, and so it's a good way of understanding yourself and a good way of relating things together. So when you think in story, you think in narrative, it's like everything's connected, because like something that happened when I was 10 relates to something that happened when I'm 35, 40, 50.
Yeah.
Something that happens when I'm 27 relates to this thing. And it's everything becomes embedded in this sort of like web-like structure. And because you're looking for the clues and the threads between scenarios, narratives, and events in your life, you can then start to see like the lessons, see the commonalities, see the even your flaws, the common mistakes you've made. Like, if I make a mistake today in a relationship, I've probably made that same mistake 10 times. And I'm just not, if I'm not thinking like as a narrative structure, sometimes that slips. And so it's like, well, why did this same issue pop up 10 times with this person or with this other person? It's like, is there a narrative? Is there something inside of me that I haven't quite understood yet? And so it keeps playing itself out. And for me, like bringing this back to archetypes in some sense, it's like I believe that's the shadow. So when Jung talks about the shadow part of yourself, or just the shadow in general, it's like it's the part of yourself that you're unaware of. And so that part of yourself that you are unaware of, and then it acts as the fool, and so it makes you look like a fool. And so anytime you look like a fool, it's pretty much your subconscious mind or unconscious mind trying to tell you, hey, there's something about yourself you're not paying attention to. And so anytime I like mess up in life, or anytime there's something like I feel quite like negative towards, or embarrassed about, or shameful about, because that's where it lives. It's shame, it's guilt, it's fear, it's all these things. And then you irrationally act out these things. You're like, well, why did I say that? Or why did I do that? And so it's like reflecting on where that came from and how many times that's popped up in the past, and trying to work out, can I then integrate that part of myself so I no longer lash out on people, I no longer and unaware. And so that's another form of enlightenment too, is to bring those other parts of yourself under that umbrella of your the hero character, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I love that. I'm interested actually in Carl Jung's theory on the shadow, and like, it's an area that's not hugely talked about as much as I think it could be. It's very much a part of us.
Oh yeah, I think like I think Jung was correct like so much with this stuff. And there was another reason why I didn't do psychology actually, was because at the university I went to, Jung wasn't a very big case study. Like there was no studies on Jung, there was no lectures on Jung. And I wasn't much bigger fan of Jung than I was for Freud. And so I kind of like I didn't think I was going to learn what I wanted to learn. And Jung's actually is based on a lot of Eastern philosophy too, and a lot around archetypes. Like I think he might have even coined the term archetypes. And for anyone who's listening that doesn't know what an archetype is, it's pretty much a transpersonal character that exists over time. So it's like the role of a king is an archetype because the king exists and then the person playing the king dies, but the role of the king is eternal. So someone always takes its place. And so the longer that character exists, the more attributes and characteristics and energy actually comes from playing that character too. So something like a father, a mother, a child, a warrior, a poet, like jobs become pretty much archetypes too. And so if you look at stories and you look at characters in those stories, you can find the commonality between, if you're a CEO and the king, you're probably going to have very similar situations in your life. They're not exactly the same in terms of external, in terms of how they play out, but internally, you're probably going to be facing the same emotions. Like, how do you deal with, a team of people? How do I deal with society? I'm in a place of leadership. So it's all the emotional stuff behind that makes that role. And by understanding other people, reading stories, reading their stories, doesn't have to be it can be fiction or non-fiction. You can discover what characteristics and traits and narratives they went through in order to, I don't know, develop yourself and excel or whatever it is that you're looking for out of that thing. But that's essentially how we would use archetypes and what an archetype is, to come back to that. But back to the shadow. Sorry, I can go on tangents.
Okay. It's interesting, actually.
Yeah.
I never thought of it like archetypes that way. Yeah, it's like if the position like is freed up, say if the king you said like then somebody else would come up.
Is moved.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's eternal. That's the biggest point. So you would argue that actually the role of a king is more real than yourself, because you will pass, but the king will live on. And so when you look at the world, you could look at the world in the way that's like, okay, well, who is the king right now? And you could say maybe that's you could it's fractal too. It's not just there's one king. It's like there's society as a whole, which is like collective consciousness, which is what Jung talked about. So it's like if we added up all the characters in the world and we projected it as one character, who would that be? And would it be a king? Would it be a queen? Would it be a joker? Would it be a warrior? Would it be a poet? Like those things, like who would actually be the projected character from there? You also have your workplace, like who's in charge of your workplace? Who's the CEO? Who's the father or king in the household? Who's the queen in a certain place? Like there's all these. It's fractal, so you can kind of see where there's also healthy. I think there's definitely healthy dynamics too. Like you have. You have like toxic, you have so positive, negative. You have a positive king, which is the light, and you also have the shadow aspect of that king. So it's like the shadow aspect of a king is like, so the king is someone who protects you, provides security and structure, but the shadow aspect would be tyranny, oppression, and and like feeling like you need to conform because that's what a leader would make you do, right? And so the shadow aspects of the feminine, the shadow aspects of the individual, of myself, the hero. So the hero and villain are like the two sides of the same coin. So every single one of us can play the hero or the villain in our lives, depending on whether or not we're aware of it or not.
Yeah. And it's like there's a saying now, and I'm not gonna be able to remember, but like it's like, who are you giving the power to, or which voice are you giving the hero or the villain? Like I know myself, like it takes a lot of meditation, self-reflection work and things like that to just even ask yourself those questions, like where am I putting my energy at the moment? And am I, sometimes there's times in life where you need to do some work for yourself to heal certain parts of yourself and things like that in order to stay on
path, on the path. I think it's actually quite simple. It's really hard, but it's really quite simple too. And I think that's what makes things harder. It's just love. I really believe it's love. Like when you say like the path, it's like, well, you have two sides, you have like left, right. So you have like this path or this path, but you also have just like love, and love's the complete unknown. Like I have no idea what happens if I follow my heart. No clue at all. You know, like if I go left, I know I'm going left. If I know I'll go right, I know I'm going right. But if I just tap into my heart, which I feel like is the middle way, the middle path as well, you have no idea. And so that's like tapping into the hero archetype, right? Because the hero acts out of love. They're like they do things because they believe in something greater than themselves, and so they don't know what's going to happen. Where the villain is a character that makes choices based on it's why they're also intellectual in movies. You'll find the villains the most intellectual character is because they're very calculated. So because they're calculated, they're living in the known world, and so it doesn't like what a villain means as well. To be a villain, it just means that you're making choices based off the known. That's another way to put it as well. Like if I jump on this thing with a certain thing to say to get a certain outcome out of it, I could say that's sort of somewhat like the villain, because I'm too afraid of being in the present moment with you and just tapping into what's organic, which is the heart, because it's unknown. And I'm trying to actually lead a conversation a certain way. I'm trying to live my life a certain way because I want a certain result. And that's actually quite selfish. And so to tap into your higher self, to tap into your greatest potential, and to tap into God, or whatever you like, source, whatever you like to call it, is to tap into that part of yourself that just does things because it loves it. And that's scary. You know, that's like, you know, say we're talking about like crossing the threshold into like taking the next step. It's like, well, you're probably not going to like it, because the truth is that you're going to have no idea where it's going to take you. And that's exactly why you should follow that path, because any other path than that path is going to be known, it's going to be self-serving, it's going to be egotistical, and you can't be at service to the world, yourself, and your higher self. So you don't really you don't have a choice. I don't think you do, but you don't. Like I think that's you know, for me, I'm like, no, I gotta follow now. I gotta follow the heart, you know, that's it, and see where it goes. Everything else is coming back to the story. Everything else is kind of boring because I know where that goes. I know where saving this much and buying a house goes, and this thing where that goes. It's like I want to live I want to feel alive as well. I want to be animated. I want to live, and I want to have this experience. And so you're only going to do that through love, but it's going to be painful too. Like it's not easy, because you're super vulnerable. You have to be super, like, I guess, open to. You're going to be open to chaos. You're going to be open to people stepping in, judgment as well, because you're not going a certain direction that was the normal direction. All these things, and so that comes into, like, you know, developing yourself, and that comes into personal development. So it's like you're actually, what personal development is just like, it's discovering who you are and discovering what your love is in life, and developing that character and developing that love, so that when things stray you off your path, it's like, actually, no, I have a very clear vision where I'm going, and I'm being led by this, not by this or this or this. Yeah, that would be my thoughts on that.
Path less trodden, for sure, isn't it? Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
And to go back as well, when you know, when I was saying, like, you know, when you found stories for the first time, you know, and you know, like, I do believe that too. You know, it's great to live life, you know, to have experiences and things like that. But just to circle back as well, you mentioned psychedelics, and I just want to find out,
Oh yeah.
You said that, is that when you found like your love for stories?
Oh,
How did that play a part in?
so nah. So I loved stories previously to that. Like I mentioned, I had a catchphrase, "Do it for the story," as a kid. I was obsessed with like I was obsessed with Lion King. Like that was, and I still am. Like I still watch that regularly. And there's a podcast on Carl Jung's, but by Jordan Peterson. It's Carl Jung and the Lion King. And he puts the whole thing together, and it blew my mind. And I've continued to develop the narrative behind that, and what the meaning of Lion King is, because it was so profound to me. So I have a full, like, I could go on. That could be it could be me in a podcast, not even an episode, but but that psychedelic trip, so I was very naive. Like I ended up, because look, when I was younger, I was quite egotistical with my intellect. Like I used to think, okay, like I can drink a certain amount of alcohol and I can be fine. I can take this substance and be fine because I have a freaking powerhouse, freaking mind going on, sort of thing. I used to think that. And so when it came to psychedelics, I was like, well, I can kind of test and have thoughts that are a bit more on the edge. And so I took DMT one time, this day with a bunch of friends, and we had like a bit of a ceremony, and it wasn't like at a party. It was like we went camping and we sat around, and it was quite beautiful. And then we took mushrooms as well. And then later that night, I was sitting on a campfire, and I just kind of started to reflect and go a little deeper into the mind, and I started to like pretty much open up like this whole other world, like this whole like this didn't like it was quite weird. Like this didn't exist. Like all of reality just disappeared. I disappeared. I went through something called ego death, which is like a very tribal thing. So it's the experience of death essentially, and then you just become like sort of like became like nothingness, and that's a story too. Like that's a massive story. So like the story and origin of the world, like where you came from potential, you came from chaos, which is what it's in a lot of ancient myth, it's referred to chaos in the beginning. So it's just like the infinite, it's the known, the unknown, it's potential. So it was kind of like I returned to that place. I returned to infinite potential, and in that place I was nothing and everything. And that's why that I've been now trying to understand that journey. So like when I look at the number zero, I see everything and nothing, because zero means nothing, but everything comes from zero. It's a circle, so that means like it's whole, but it's also a hole in the ground, and so it's a bit of a paradox. And so I kind of actually went there in a really strange way. Like I went there internally in psychological sense. And then I had to, it was pure love. It was pure, like, because pure love is pretty much, it's the creating force of the world. So, and I try to explain that to people. Like people say like the world's meaningless. Well, it's not, it is meaningless, but the reason it's meaningless is because it's unconditional love. You think about a parent, it's like, well, what do I want my kid to be? I want them to be whatever they want to be. That's complete love, but that's also complete meaninglessness. It's like letting go of whatever your intention was. And so love has that nature to it. It's like it has no constriction, right? And so it was really strange to live in that place. And so when I was looking now at stories and narrative, I was like, oh my God, like this is what they're talking about. And so my theory is that they're actually taking psychedelics and experiencing these things, and then drawing and writing about these mystical experiences through psychedelics. And this created then like culture, and created narrative and story, and a very deep and rich understanding of ancient philosophy. And so that was where it kind of kicked off like a lot of a love story, but then it connected everything. I was like, oh wow, okay. And then I remember I sat down around a campfire with like 12 different characters, and then I was like, oh, I realized later, not then, but I realized later on that they were like archetypes. And so one person was this archetype, one was a joker, one was a warrior, one was a poet, and everyone shared their stories, had different roles. And then I was like circling around, and I was actually becoming every single one of them through time. So I'd spend like years as one character, as another character, another character. And I was like, oh my God, like and it was eternal. And I actually thought I was going absolutely mental. I was like, holy shit, I'm stuck in a loop, and this is just insane. And in some sense, I feel like I'm quite comfortable with that now. Like I understand that it kind of is eternal. Like we just keep everything's cyclical. Like seasons are cyclical. The world's rotating something else. Everything's in rotation, and so rotation just means like it comes back to wholeness again. And so the wholeness is like the first dimension. It's like the original source of everything, and then duality exists in order to experience and move in. So that like I feel like even this 3D body is like a split from the original source in order to exist. And without having my physical limitations, I couldn't experience anything. I would be stuck in infinite potential. And so that's why I started to really like try and understand these stories and what they meant by chaos, and everything returns back to chaos. But for me, I personally changed that word now. Like I don't use chaos. I use creativity, because I think in today's society, like there's a stigma around that. So if I say females are chaotic, that's not going to land well. If I say females are creative, I think that's a much better word, right? So I say creative because it's true, but creativity also means destruction. Like to be creative, you need to look at something and be able to destroy that thing and create something else. That's literally what creation would be. So that would be the opposites, the positive and negative of feminine energy. It's the ability to give birth and to create something, but also the ability to destroy something as well, because they go hand in hand. And as a male figure, as a masculine energy, your two parts are the ability to structure something, and then also to oppress something. And so it's action, it's doing, and then the feminine is like healing. And so then looking at like astrology and looking at the role of the sun, so the sun is like the father, because it heat, and back to physiology, right? The sun heats the body up, and when it heats the body up, you then want to move, it expands, and so it's action. And so that's why it's a very masculine thing, like to act, to do something, to be like a warrior. And then you have the feminine, which is the moon, which is like the pulling and pulling, it's like the pulling and push of the ocean. And so, and it's tied to water, and water is a healing property. It also gives life and gives it, so it's like, and the thing is, it's conflated in different areas in the world too. It's not just the sun's masculine and the moon's feminine. Depending on where you are, it has a different role because it's a different story. Sometimes the sun's very hot and it can kill you. Sometimes the moon is, so it depends on where you are in the world that the story develops. And so different civilizations have a different gender or different energy for each thing, because the energy was different in that part of the world. So that's where we have like these conflating ideas, and people are like, oh, because at the end of the day, it's all about the actual emotion behind it and how someone felt internally as opposed to the external. So what did that thing do internally to me? That's how that originated in terms of story. But that psychedelic trip, it kind of like, I looked into it, obviously after, and it's like something I learned was that like it increases your if you have a mystical experience, which I would call that a mystical experience, it increases like openness to by one whole standard deviation, but then it also increases like your meaningfulness for life, like your purpose in life, because it reveals you things and shows you how things are connected. And so for me, I don't know if someone will have the exact same experience, but because I was already so fascinated in story, the message behind all of that was like that I'm a storyteller, that everything's to do with story. And so that the whole theme of that journey was about narrative, was about story, was about campfires. And around a campfire, you tell stories. And then it's, I don't know, it's a little weird, but my nickname's the cave. Yeah, tribal. My nickname's the caveman, like for my friends, because my last name's Cavallari. So I was always called the caveman before this thing too. And so I was like, okay, the caveman tells stories and this thing. And so I've now been developing this like character called Out of the Caveman on my Instagram, just because it's a bit of a funny thing to do, but it kind of relates everything together and all that sort of stuff. So like, it's just and whether or not it's legit or not, that doesn't matter to me, because it's more fun, it's more playful. And if you look into like another thing I really love is like etymology. So when you look at like the root word, like the root meaning of a word, so illusion. So it's example, like all of that was an illusion. I had to admit that all life was an illusion. That was something I had to when I had to let go of reality to enter this like void, and I had to admit that it was all an illusion. And that was quite insane to me, because I was like, oh shit, nothing's meaningful at all, blah blah blah. And then I found out through Alan Watts that the word illusion actually means to play. So everything's a play. And I was like, oh, so everything's like a story. Like, so Shakespeare, like the whole world's a stage and everyone's an actor and everyone's, we all have roles to play here and everything. So I was like, it just kind of really cemented the idea that we're living in a narrative world. We're living in a play, and you get to pick the character you want to play. And if you don't want to play that character more, you don't have to play that character more. But understand, you're simply playing. You're simply just here to play, and there's no meaning to that. But the meaning is that you get the enjoyment and fulfillment of whatever it is. Because if there was a set meaning, if there was a certain character to play, a certain person to be, then there'd only be one type of character, only one type of person, and that wouldn't be meaningful at all. That'd actually be very stagnant and boring. It just collapse and die anyway. And so that actually happens to you internally. When I am very strict and rigid on a certain character that I've developed, and I attach myself to that character, something will happen in life where it collapses it down. Like something chaotic will come into your life and it will smash it, because it's reminding you that you are not that character. You are the creative spirit. You are the soul, or whatever it is, that chooses what character to play. And at any moment in time, you can choose to play whatever character you want in life. And not to say that not to say everyone should just go ahead and do that. Some characters aren't worth playing. Some are better to play as well. So it's like, what kind of life do I want? What kind of character, what kind of events happen to certain characters? It's something, a question you could ask yourself, like, or what kind of character am I playing? And how is that causing reality to happen to me? And so something that, I think it's Joe Dispenza, he says, your personality is your personal reality. And that again links into story. What character you determines what happens to you.
Yeah. It's so innate, isn't it? Like I feel like a lot of us know who that that character is. It's
yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. And it's different for everyone, but we know, like, I know, like, I have that vision for myself. I have that feeling, like, and it's coming back to the childlike self, right? It's like something I like been trying to cultivate is like, where's my drive come from? It's like, actually, I look back at like little Anthony. I'm like, what the hell did that guy dream about? Like, what did he want? What were his desires? Because they were kind of more pure, right?
Yeah.
They weren't like influenced by social media. It wasn't influenced by my social friends right now. It was simply because he just loved those things. And so if I can remember, which is to put myself back together again, to like, what was that kid? What was his aspirations? What were his dreams? What did he love? He loved storytelling. Great, go down storytelling, go down this path. Because I was in health science, I've been in blockchain, I've done a million different types of jobs, and yeah, I was fearful of letting go of everything, what everyone would think, in order to do this path here, which I don't even really know what it is. I'm just going to podcast. I'm going to research things and just start talking more about things that I learn and telling stories, and that's all I know that I'm going to do. And then wherever that heads to, that's okay. But I do know if I picked coaching, which is what I was doing beforehand, but like my goal was to open up a gym. So I knew that. I was like, oh, it's a gym, it's this thing. And I was like, well, it's actually not really who I am. But not to say that I want to open up a gym. Maybe the gym's different. And now the gym has evolved. It's now not even a gym. It's more like a studio. It's now more like a personal development studio, which is like, you go there to learn a whole bunch of things, not just physical training, but you go there to learn about philosophy. You go there to learn about social media and marketing. Maybe you go somewhere you can go to train in today's world. Like, it's literally like a training ground for today's modern society. That would be pretty cool. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I think just letting go of to the potential of it all. Yeah. And that's the trick too. Like, you don't want to end up like Peter Pan, where everything's a possibility and you never grow up. You do need to become something. And that's important too. So I'm not saying just let go of everything. I'm saying more follow what your heart is and be okay with becoming whatever that is.
Yeah. To listen to your heart's calling as it comes, like, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So so travels is next for you then? That's the next chapter then.
That's the next chapter. So when and where?
Yeah, when? First protocol.
So next year will be April, May next year.
Okay.
So I'm 29 in May, and I don't know whether I should have it'll be the first time I have my birthday overseas, or if I should spend one more birthday here.
Okay.
So I'm kind of deciding what. I'm still tossing that up.
Lovely.
So we'll see what happens. But where am I going? So okay. People are gonna hate me for saying this. But my best friend, he works at Qantas, and I've been asking him for like his staff travel for years.
Sorry,
I was like, I'll give you $5,000 because I wanted to do this staff travel.
Oh, okay. Staff travel, is it?
Yeah, he's got staff travel. Yeah. And I've been asking him for years, like, man, because I've had this idea for a long time, like traveling the world and like experiencing and being open to that. I've had for a very long time. However, when I was younger, I probably would have been drinking, partying. It would have been a very different experience. So I'm quite glad that it's the way that everything's evolved, is that like I'm going now is who I am now. I think I'll get more out of that. So anyway, so I actually recently went through a breakup, left my job as well. And I was trying to open up this coaching business in this studio because I just moved to a new area in Australia. So I grew up like in the West area. So like this whole conversation about philosophy and archetypal stuff, it doesn't land quite well in where I grew up. So I moved over to another area which is more by the beaches.
Okay.
And there's yoga studios here. There's other forms of training and modalities here. So I thought this would be a good area for me to kind of start again and start my business here again. But it just wasn't working out. So I guess that's kind of another tip for everyone. But like, I just felt like it wasn't through lack of effort. It was like just not meant to be. Like, so I was trying really hard to get this studio up and coaching and everything, and like the website wouldn't work. The rent went down, like just a whole bunch, like, worked for some guy, just a lot of stuff. And I was like, okay, so I let go of that and said, like, look, I'm just gonna travel next year. And rather than trying to teach people about, the idea is around the 4 elements. So it's like fire, earth, water, air, and the 5th element is yourself. And so fire is the spirit, water is the soul, earth is the body, and air is the mind. And so that becomes like your base for like, are you spiritually fit, mentally fit, etc. And in the studio, there was going to be like breath work. So there'd be air classes. There'd be like nutrition classes. There'd be like strength classes, which is under earth. There would be like men's circles, women's circles. That would be under water, emotions. And then there'd be like HIIT, cardio, boxing, martial arts under fire. So that was the idea of training as well. Like if I have a client, I want to train them in these 5 areas, including themselves and ether and spirit. That would be the other one. And so when I couldn't do that and found that that's not happening, I decided to go travel. And the purpose of the travel was to go to these places that I can learn more about these things. So to learn more about the air elements and breath work. Ayurvedic medicine is based around the elements. So go down to India, learn about the elements, and then hopefully come back and bring back knowledge. That ties into the hero's journey. The hero is someone that goes out to the unknown world, acquires knowledge, and comes back and shares it with their community. And so for me, it was more like, okay, I know that this is maybe what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I'm taking a leap of faith into that journey. But once I decided to do that, right, like it was crazy. My best friend called me up. He's like, hey man, I know you're traveling next year. You need to sign up today, because I just saw this in my emails. But if you pay me $1,000 right now, I can get you staff travel. So you get $1,000 flight credit, and you get staff travel 90% off flights.
Wow.
And I was like, because I had no idea how I was going to pull this off. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to travel for a year or more. So then this came about, and I was like, holy shit. So now I got staff travel until he leaves. I'm hoping he doesn't leave his job or gets fired or anything like that, because that'll really screw up everything. But yeah, now I kind of do have like the ability to kind of just go wherever I like, because it doesn't cost too much. And yeah, so I'm really excited for that. And then in terms of when, and like I can't book until three. It's like you can only book 3 months in advance. Like I can't book it right now for May, because it's too long. Like I have to book it 3 months before. So I don't know where I'm going yet, because I'm kind of waiting to see what pops up, what, like, maybe I'm talking to you, like, and something crazy in Ireland's happening. I'm like, okay, Ireland's the first place to go to. Like, so I'm kind of giving up my desire, giving up what I think I should do, and trying to listen a bit more, because I felt like I made a lot of choices in my life where I became the villain, right? I did things because it was logical to do, and I actually ended up going backwards a lot. Like that's a whole other story. But like with my like investing career, or my investing in the past, like even jobs, like me picking health science or sports science was a logical thing. It wasn't the heart. Certain friendships I keep on to because they're familiar and safe, as opposed to like trying to open up more space with people that are more aligned to me. A lot of decisions I feel like I make, and I think a lot of us make, is comfort. Is because we like the familiarity, and we like the known.
Yes.
And so I really want to dedicate at least 1 year next year to just being completely open to the unknown, and following my heart and seeing where that takes me. And if it's 1 year, it's fine. I lose a year. But I think COVID, when that hit, it's like, well, I lost 2 then, and it just goes to show like anything can happen. And so it's like I would rather be on this path than to be on another path and have it doesn't, you don't know where it's going anyway. You can make the most logical decisions, and it like could backfire on you anyway. So it's like, You may as well. You're all in
Take
already
those
in
chances.
life, so it's like you might as well. Yeah, exactly. So that's a bit about where, but in terms of where, like this Japan, Peru, South America, North America too, because I'm quite curious about how a lot of businesses have taken knowledge from South America and then integrated like someone like Orby Marcus. I really love what he's done. So he's like they take a lot of because they're so close to South America, they just go down to South America, they do a lot of spiritual journeys, and then they take it back up and start a business, and then they teach people. And I'm like, okay, cool. So when I come back to Australia, I want to maybe speak to someone who's done that elsewhere in America because they're just I feel like they're ahead of Australia in terms of like narrative. The narrative is always there first, and it comes over here. So so I think it'd be a smart thing to do. But again, that's me thinking logically. But
But you're
I
being
can't help it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm
And
trying to
it's
step away from that
first.
too. So I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about yourself? You traveled much and
I've mostly covered a lot of Europe so far. I definitely want to visit Peru and South America and North America as well. And I definitely want to get to your side of the world in Australia and the Asian countries as well. I've a lot to cover yet, but
yeah.
like yeah, it's to experience like different cultures and things like that. It's lovely where I'm set, like in Ireland. It's quite easy to travel around Europe and things like that and get like nice cheap flights and stuff. So it's very handy. But it's
Yeah.
on my
Yeah.
radar.
No, I'm envious of that. That's why I'm like here. It's kind of like it's a very all or nothing. It's like you don't want to go overseas for a month or two. It's so far. So
Yeah,
like once you're off, you're off.
that's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a great way to do it and like have it as an experience, like in the way you're doing it. And have
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
freedom, on the road. Very
Well,
back to
actually, to be completely honest with you, actually, funny, yeah, it's to do with storytelling. And one of my favorite shows as a kid is Avatar: Last Airbender. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
What is it? Uh,
Avatar: Last Airbender. I'm really into like animated TV shows.
okay.
Anyways, the concept is there's this kid who's the Avatar, and there's four nations. There's Earth, Air, Fire, Water nations, and each of them have like their own power, right? In those like style, and each of them is a different character. So like water people are emotional, fire people are more passionate, air are more airy fairy and playful, and earth are more strict and strong. So it's like you have different character types. And anyways, the Avatar is a character that holds the balance in the world. So he's in control of like ensuring there's balance and harmony and peace between all these nations because they all think differently and they do things differently. And so there has to be someone that can actually he actually holds all the elements within himself.
Okay.
And that I was actually watching that and I was like, oh, that's what I'll do. I'll go and study all the different elements around the world.
Oh,
And I'll try and find like balance and back to the human, back to physiology. It's like the body is always trying to find homeostasis. So it's always trying to find equilibrium. It's always trying to find balance. And so and that's the middle way as well. Like when people say like what's Christ consciousness, what is the Buddhist middle way? It's homeostasis in the body, but it's also the middle path in the mind, which is for me it's love. But it's like when you have two choices to make, you can go one way or the other way. Another really good practice of in between the moment is actually finding what the middle path is. So if it's like going to a party and me going like crazy and drinking a shitload, or me staying home doing nothing, they're two extremes. So it's like, well, what's my heart telling me? What do I actually want to do? I want to go there for one drink. I want to leave at like 9:30 at night, then come home. That's really what I want to do. I don't want to stay home, but I also don't want to go like crazy. So it's like it's just being honest and open, and that I find that that's actually a way of like that is also consciousness because you're aware of the two different polar choices and you're choosing to do the middle of that thing. But you can put that in anything, right? It could be like with your relationship, stay or leave. Okay, well, what's the middle path? What do I actually want to do?
what is it like?
Sorry?
Yeah, it's like asking the question, like, what's the need? Like,
Yeah, and what's your heart telling you? So that'll be the center point. And so you could live life in a way like that. And I actually think that's what like consciousness is and enlightenment is. It's like actually being aware of your choices, right? It's being aware and conscious of things you do. So it's actually knowing the two different options and then finding whatever that is, because point A, point B, everything in between is infinite potential. So it's like what your middle is different to my middle, because you could say like you want to go and have 10 drinks and come back at 2 o'clock, but that was your middle path.
Yeah.
So it's unknown as well. So like that's where you could distinguish like what it is for you, and to live in that space. And so that's really what I'm trying to cultivate more this year, next year, because I think I've always gone one or the other. It's like I'm all in, I'm all out, and I have that kind of characteristic type. Actually, no, I think there's an art in trying to find the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Takes practice, no doubt.
Oh, for sure. 100%. The amount of times I don't do that, I say I found it, I'm like, that's the middle. And I'm like on the other end, I'm like, then I get upset because coming back to the goal I had, I misaimed. I fell off my goal, and so that causes negative emotion because I'm not becoming that person I thought I was becoming.
Yeah.
So then you need to atone, you need to be at one again and find harmony and homeostasis again. So it's like, example, how do you do that? Let's say you betrayed yourself in a scenario, like you said you were going to do something, you didn't do it. It's not, don't ignore that. Like, do not go home and then just brush it off, watch TV and just whatever it is, and ignore the fact that you betrayed yourself. Acknowledge that you actually somewhat betrayed yourself in that scenario, and then make it up to yourself and say, okay, like I know we said we weren't going to drink, and we did drink. That's okay. We're still learning, we're still progressing. Let's find the medium. Let's find another middle path. Is it like, maybe let's go for a walk today instead, and that will then counter. It's like I've made it aware. I've heard that part of myself that was I've hurt, and then I'm healing that, and then I'm putting it back into homeostasis again, right? Which means I'm not stressed, I'm not panicking, I'm pulling back my emotions to the center to find that harmony and resonance with myself again, and align myself to what my vision was. And maybe it's a new vision, and that's evolving. Maybe you're too extreme, like maybe you should drink a little bit, and to say that you're never going to drink again is not the right thing for you to do right now, or whatever it is. It's about, I feel like it's about that too. It's about finding that middle ground and
being honest.
Making peace with yourself within. Being honest. Honesty, I think honesty is directly correlated to intellect as well.
Yeah.
Like I think like you can seem a lot smarter in the world if you just tell the truth, because like it's a hard thing to do, and you get to places quicker by telling the truth. Like if we have a conversation about XYZ and that's not really what it's about, then we spent hours and hours and hours. Imagine you do that over years in your life. You've gotten so far from the truth that now you want to start, like, actually the truth is I want to do storytelling. Shit, I'm 40 years ahead now, like and the truth the entire time. So it's like, take that leap of faith. Like, what is that part of you that knows the truth, and come back to that, because the longer you leave that, the more layers you put on top, and it becomes harder to find the truth too, because you've laid it with so many different options and logic, I'd say. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's best to shortcut all that and just stick with the truth. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, exactly. That would be my major advice, actually. I was thinking about that the other day.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I don't know how many times sometimes you kind of can go along with something for a while, but it always comes back until you
there's so many things, like, yeah, even just it could be friendships, could be jobs, career, relationships, could be like literally it could be anything that you're doing. So it's like it's worth coming back to and figuring out, is this actually what I want to be doing? Or am I just doing this because of the routine I'm in, and I'm afraid of letting people down?
Yeah. Comfort zone.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited to follow your travels now next year. I'll have to.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah. We'll follow. I'm on Instagram. I'll share my stuff with you on there, and hopefully we'll have a few more conversations. We can even just do updates on what's been happening, and I can have you on my show next time as well. That'll be really cool to learn more about you. I always feel like, no, I shouldn't say guilty because it's not the right thing to do, but I feel like I like to know you more and give you back the time to understand a bit more about yourself too. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I'd be delighted to be on one of your talks as well. Like, so absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll tee it up for sure.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you. Well, if it's okay, then I'll share your details out with my list.
Yeah, of course.
Well, and follow your journey as well. So that'll be great.
Beautiful.
Lovely.
Awesome.
Thanks for
All
the
right. Thanks
conversation.
everyone for tuning in and listening. I'll hope you guys enjoyed today's show with Claire and I. So thanks.
100%. Thank you, Anthony.